Come again?
No, sir. Reflection आ रहा है ना, थोड़ी सी light अगर dim हो जाती है.
No, that's why I wanted to switch off this light, but some of you wanted the room lights.
Can we individually switch them off?
No, I can't. No, there's enough sunlight. See, if you open the windows at the back, in those rooms, there'll be sunlight coming. If one of you can please volunteer. Patrick, would you mind opening the windows in those rooms?
Yeah, it looks nice now.
Yeah. There's enough sunlight. See, if you open the windows at the back, in those rooms, there'll be sunlight coming. All right, folks, I'll get started. Today, we have a slightly different way of doing things. I created a plan for this week. Much of the plan has to do with what we'll do in the subsequent days. Now, we will take stock of where we are. This is how we'll do today's sessions. But before I do that, let me remind you guys that, see, I, Chanda, Praveen, and quite a few people here, Riaz, all of us are here to help you. So take our help. I am, of course, here. Some of you drop by my office and ask for help. And you can reach out to Chanda, you can reach out to Riaz, you can reach out to Praveen. And there are other sort of people in dual roles. Athira is in a dual role. She is both an instructor. But obviously, Athira is part of a team. So it might be sharing your best ideas with the team. Praveen too is part of a team. So he's both a TA, and Athira and Praveen are both TAs and helpers. Riaz and Chanda and myself are there. We can help you. So remember, it's a very long and complicated journey when you climb Mount Everest. Edmund Hillary had the wisdom of using Tenzing Sherpa, who practically carried him to the top along with all his luggage and gave him the glory of being the first on Everest. So likewise, let us help you there. We are, and this is just a small marketing spiel. I just do it. Maybe I should keep iterating. Remember, guys, you all work in corporations. Support Vectors, when it does the teaching, these workshops, these are essentially break even. Like, we are not making any profit. Just look at the investment. You're looking at the big screen and all of that. Whatever tuition comes gets reinvested here. But we, Support Vectors, also needs to make a livelihood. And the only way we can make a livelihood is if you sort of spread the word, cause the next generation to come here, next cohort to be built. But at the same time, more than that, if you can give us corporate opportunities, corporate training, corporate consulting opportunities, wherever you are, whichever place you work for, you guys, if you have any say, do put in a good word for us. We have a track record of translating bleeding edge research and innovation into products, high impact products. The thing that the Support Vectors team has created over the years, I can honestly say today is generating revenues for the large companies, which are annual revenues added over all the projects is close to almost a little shy of $1 billion. Right? So we do create large scale enterprise products that last, that work for decades.
Your screen is not shared.
Oh, my screen is not shared. Hang on, please, 1 second, please. Albert, give me a second to fix this issue. And I will. And all right, folks. So what I was saying once again is that we are there to help you, and we look to you for help.
I think your face is very dim because there's no lighting on your thing. So
yeah. If you don't mind living with it for some time, please.
For your recording, right? Your face. Forget about us. It's dark.
My face is dark.
Yes, face is dark.
I don't know how to fix it, guys.
But it's okay. I guess not too dark. I can.
If you don't mind, bear with it. I'll fix it in the break. So anyway, guys, this is it. Anyway, my little spiel to you guys that help us out a little bit. I thought I'll start with a fun fact today. Many people think that artificial intelligence is something, or a pursuit of it is very recent, but you can find allusions to it in every ancient culture. You can find it in the Greek culture. You can find it in much of the European, the Middle Eastern culture. If you think of Arabian Nights, guys, can you please mute yourself? If you're watching it on YouTube, go to another room. If you are familiar, for example, with stories and mythologies, every single mythology has human beings creating gods, right? And if you are familiar with Arabian Nights, you know about Aladdin and his magic lamp, the genie that comes out of it, that can do magical things. Whatever you ask, if a human being can do in a year, the jinn will do in a moment. Right? We are living in that age today. It is hard to imagine. The latest I heard is there's a nice paper about, which is an extension of the simulacra paper that we covered, in which somebody said, why not create, just like the simulacra, create a little town, but in this case, a software company. Let's designate a CEO, a CTO, a few foot soldiers, right? The CEO will give the strategic vision. The CTO will then translate it into actions for the foot soldiers. And the idea is give them a business problem and have it translated to a software solution. A few foot soldiers, right? The CEO will give the strategic vision. The CTO will then translate it into actions for the foot soldiers. And the idea is give them an idea.
It's somebody watching the live stream.
Yes. If you guys can please, if you are watching it on live stream,
You can mute them. Who is those? Kate?
Yeah, actually,
Kate.
Kate is not here, and I don't have any volunteers who can help me today. Patrick, I'll appreciate that, guys. I think it's pretty hard for people to. All right, Patrick, you're the co-host now. Thank you for volunteering for this. So the reason I bring it up is this particular experiment. It's an interesting paper. It's an extension of the simulacra work. It managed to create a working, complete software, everything, along with tests and everything, in the better part of 7 minutes. So if you're thinking of, if you have a 3-year time horizon for your software projects, think again. There is a new world coming. So the millennial dream of many, many years is becoming a reality. What have we learned? I would like to recap what we have learned in the last few weeks. A month has gone by. This is our 5th session. What we learned is there is a vast gap. There's a chasm between the mathematics behind machine learning, behind AI, and its enterprise scale deployment into something real, isn't it? For the longest part, we have been doing workshops in which we focused on the mathematics. If you remember, we focused a lot on the theory, on the research papers. We must have covered at least 30 research papers in the last, in this year itself. And all of those research papers, as we covered, they were all marvelous. They were just wonderful work. So there is a whole tribe, vast tribe of researchers and mathematicians and theoretical computer scientists who are all busy, AI researchers who are busy creating better and better algorithms. And obviously, in a way, the poster child or the key equation for the learning in machine learning is this equation that you see on the screen. Can anybody remind me, what does this equation say? What is this the equation of? Close. Gradient descent. It is the step of learning, one step of learning. So this is the unifying point that all algorithms ultimately come to in the learning journey. So it is going from theory to an enterprise scale, robust and high performance architecture. And what we learned in the last 1 month is that the other reality, the reality of engineering the AI into a large scale product. And I wanted to show you what it all involves when you do that. By now, you're getting a sense of, tell me which of these things you have understood for now. You realize that first comes the people. Many of you have learned that in a team, there are different talents. People come and form teams. They bring different skills to the table. Somebody brings hardware ability, somebody builds infrastructure ability, somebody brings data engineering ability, somebody brings algorithmic ability, somebody brings very strong programming ability, somebody brings leadership skills and maturity about how, from their experience of running large organizations. So it takes a village to raise a child, isn't it? And each skill that you bring is equally essential. You cannot have a team move to success. If you consider each of the teams that we have here, the 8 teams are marketed as a startup. And I hope you realize that in your team, each of you have sufficient diversity and each team member has something to bring to the table, which is very important. They all look at AI from a different lens and they bring to AI a different talent. At the same time, there is a hope that they pick up other skills from you, and that is community learning, that is social learning. There's a lot of learning from the cohort. How many of you would agree from that you're learning from your cohort members, isn't it? There's a lot of learning. So that's the people aspect. There's a data infrastructure aspect. Many of you did not realize that these things actually have to be deployed at scale, but now do. How many of you felt you learned something about the AI framework to deploy your AI models? And you have done it for the first time really at scale, right? So quite a few hands I see here. This is the data infrastructure, right? I think of it as the railway track over which your AI train goes thundering by long distances. But it takes a lot of effort to lay the railway tracks. And that is your data infrastructure. The data infrastructure that we encountered had 2 parts. The data pipeline, which is the whole journey of taking raw data and doing the traditional ETL or ELT or whatever data transformations, as we would say. What is the purpose of data transformations from an AI perspective? Who would like to speak to that? What is the purpose of the data transformations that we did? What data transformations have we done in the project so far? Chunking, extraction, converting all sorts of data to plain text, images, etc. Right? Those are extractions. What are we doing? Our end goal is, what is the end goal of that data pipeline? Anybody who would like to say that? To create vector embeddings that can be searched. Vector embeddings that can be searched. And more specifically, if you generalize from that, it is to create a feature store, because machine learning deals with vectors. Vectors are features. The only feature that you encountered so far are the sentence embedding vectors, sentence vectors. But as you move forward, you will be creating more and more and different kinds of vectors, features. These features and vectors are synonymous to the mathematician. Right? You need to create a feature store. Why do we want to create a feature store? A, because the same features may be reused by different algorithms. It takes a lot of hard work to produce those features. So you want to create a feature store, and I'm introducing this concept today of a feature store, and I want you to do it as part of your project. Till now, you have been adding your feature store to the database. I want you as a team to figure out what is the best tool to maintain a feature store, right? And how can you have a system, a pipeline, such that multiple algorithms can read from that feature store? efficiently. They should not have to reinvent the wheel. They should not have to start by text extraction or image encoding, right? Image translation, right? Because these features sometimes are themselves the end result of AI models. As you noticed, those vectors didn't just pop up. They are themselves the result of applying AI models. Sometimes they're the result of applying large-scale data transformations like Spark jobs. They popped out, right? So have a feature store, a robust feature store. Your organization will, at the end of the day, live or die by the quality and richness of the feature store. This was, by the way, a lesson that many companies learned early on. For example, one of the things that people realized in LinkedIn was this, that early on they realized that you need to make machine learning data available as a service. But if you peel the onion and see from our perspective, what is it saying? If organizations all have a central feature store with good governance, then data scientists can have an idea and they don't have to go and reinvent the wheel. They can start, look at the features quickly, build a model, train it, and see what happens. Does that make sense, guys? So feature store is important, and I want to bring about the importance of that. That is a journey end for data. That was the pipeline part of it. The second part is the inference. We learned you need an ML platform to do your inferences, isn't it? It is not enough to have good models. You can pick good models. We haven't done model fine-tuning. There's a second half of this project, this bootcamp, where you'll have to train models of your own. But for now, one thing you must have realized that you need a proper platform to deploy your models. If you try and doing it on Flask, it's a recipe for disaster, right? Why is it not really disaster? Not from the perspective that Flask won't be able to do it, but because your team will be busy reinventing the wheel, reinventing a lot of the consideration that people have been thinking about in the world of AI. You don't want to do that, right? So that is it. That brings about the whole, go ahead.
How do you distinguish between the ML platform and the data infrastructure?
See, data infrastructure, the way I look at it is, I consider they're intersecting sets. There's a lot of overlap. So for example, let's take this task. If I'm just taking data and computing, I have the date of birth of people and I have the expiration date. I want to create something like, how long did they live? Right. The question is that feature engineering? Is that AI? Is this part of MLOps? It's certainly a part of MLOps because MLOps incorporates everything. But I would put it more on the side of just plain data pipeline because, you know, this is X minus Y, isn't it? Or finding out somebody's age or finding out, doing a lookup given an IP address, which country this IP request came from, and therefore doing a geographical analytics, right? Dashboards. That's part of just data, business intelligence, and so forth. I wouldn't call it MLOps per se, even though the terminology gets vague, gets a lot of overlap. I just said that computing, how long did a person live, seems to be straightforward. I may use it for business intelligence. But then if I tell you that a whole branch of machine learning called survival analysis literally studies or uses as a root how long somebody lived, especially when you're looking at oncology, cancer, and things like that, then you just did feature extraction, isn't it? So then it begins to overlap because what you just did is a feature vector. You created a feature associated with the person. So there is a considerable degree of overlap between the two, and it can get a little bit funny. For example, I hear that Facebook, in a brilliant stroke of marketing, decided that how do they make their jobs look more exciting, more sexy? So they went and renamed all their SQL and data engineering titles to data scientist. right? And then you would get hired as a data scientist and sit there in your cube and you would be writing SQL.
Even data scientist was going to Facebook.
Oh yeah, the term data scientist was coined at Facebook, right? So, well, so there is these days the definitions are very fluid. Like people assure me that first there was machine learning and now there is AI, right? So, which is absurd in my view of thinking, right? AI is the vast field. Machine learning is the theoretical core, the real engine driving it. But what do you do? So that is about the ML platform and that. Albert.
Yes, so you talk about feature store and you talk about inference, right? So in our case, of our project category, project one. So what would be the feature store? Feature store would be an API that gives you the search results.
No, you have only two. You have only one feature store. The chunks table where you store your embedding vector. Remember that column. So you don't really have a feature store. What you have is a mixture. What you ended up doing is saving your embedding vectors as a column of a relational database, right? So you don't have a proper feature store. And I'm introducing the concept of a feature store today. And I'm saying from here onwards, one of the new things that you just got introduced to a new animal in the zoo, right? Go pet it, make friends with it.
And the inference is basically the API that gives you the search results.
That is
okay. You answered
the model and the model and the API. Excellent. Good question, sir. So that's that. So MLOps. Now comes one more fact, guys. I haven't addressed the security and compliance. Why is security important? Like you're just searching, user is just searching. Why is security important? Many things. Well, are you searching people's private data? Can somebody's name pop up? Even if the name doesn't pop up, can I still identify who the person is? Right? The usual belief is, for example, let me talk a little bit about it. When Netflix announced its famous Netflix prize of $1 million, anyone of you remember the Netflix prize many, many years ago? It shook the world at the turn of the century. It shook the world. And every research team in AI jumped into it. And some of these research teams spent months and months of effort. The cumulative worth, or if you add up what those organizations had to pay to support those researchers to compete for that Netflix prize, that itself would be in hundreds of millions, right? That goes to show that mathematicians can do all math except money math, right? So all of these great researchers got together and solved that problem. And out of it came many great things, including the alternating least square algorithm, which led to a whole cottage industry of recommender systems. If you think about the 2005 to 2010 or 2003, 2004 to 2010, just like today, every company is about LLM. In those days, every company was about the recommender system, isn't it? But right at that time, somebody pointed out that the training data that was released was that Netflix was pretty sure it is anonymized and it seemed harmless. Who saw what movie? But all the identities were removed. Guess what? Researchers managed to unmask the identities, which was a surprise. People didn't expect that. So out of it came various theories of anonymity, K anonymity, L diversity, and so on and so forth are quantitative measures to look at it. So if you think you have anonymized the data, think again. Just because you erased username, right, email address, passwords, etc., is no guarantee that you have achieved anonymity. Talk to an expert. Right? Reach out to support vectors, we'll help you. No, I'm kidding. So compliance is a big deal. You have to, laws are coming at you pretty strong these days, right? Europe just has this Europe AI Act. Congress is debating one. There's a bipartisan support to have an AI Act. The US White House has a blueprint for the AI Bill of Rights, not for the AI itself, but for citizens in the presence of AI algorithms because companies are abusing the AI algorithms to essentially topple democracies, micro-target individuals and their weaknesses. We are all the victims of it. Look at your credit card bills today and your credit card bills from a few years ago. You would realize that you're spending far more today than you were spending before. Every month you get a sticker shock looking at your credit card bill.
Why
Right?
is that?
Hmm?
Why is that?
Because they know exactly what you would, if they show it to you, you will buy. Today in Amazon, most shopping, 70% of the shopping, I am told, or more than the 80%, does not happen because you searched for something, but it happens because they showed you something and you happen to buy it. Right? Think about that.
Or better yet, if you've seen the subscription, they just send it to you, it just comes to your place.
That's right. Oh yes, a subscription. That's true.
I have had things just show up and now you have to go through the pain of returning it
Wow.
and fixing it.
Wow. Yes. So we live in a world of predatory use of AI, and the big companies have the big GPUs and they have the big algorithms and they're up to you. I mean, think about it. Democracy's country. Here is a statistics that will shock you. I learned about it only yesterday. One of the people who got a Nobel Peace Prize and who's bringing, shame on me for forgetting her name, Popper or something from Philippines. She pointed out in an interview yesterday on was it CBS or National Public Radio? What's her name? Do you remember? The Nobel laureate from Philippines. Okay, so all right. So, anyway, she pointed that by last year, 60% of the countries were controlled by dictators. Right? Which was a shocking number. Everybody was shocked yesterday, last year. You know what the number for 2023 is? 72% of the countries in the world, apparently, are controlled by dictators. And the US seems to be thundering ahead on that dangerous road. Right? We have no idea what will happen from this upcoming election. Sorry if that looks like a poetical statement, but it's a fact. I've never thought in the wildest dream this oldest democracy would ever have to fear that its democracy itself would be at stake. It is at stake.
Maria Ressa.
Maria Ressa. Maria Ressa.
I thought scientist, journalist.
Journalist, yeah. She got the Nobel Prize for that, yes.
And same for India too, sir.
Same for India too. Very much true for, anyway, it's an interpretational thing. So guys, but security comes in many ways. Today, Chanda received a lovely message on his cell phone from me, right? Saying, could you acknowledge this message? He acknowledged it. And it says, I'm busy in a conference call, right? And a client needs some money quickly. Could you just send this much money to a Paytm account in India? Right? So security is a big concern. The phishing and all of this happens. By the way, guys, I never text. Right? Let me put it this way. I rarely read anybody's text and I never send text, almost never. Right? So if you get a text from me, it's not from me. I am the old-fashioned guy who stays away from social media. I still believe in the old-fashioned, plain old telephone system. What's email, 90% of which I ignore. So if you want to send me an email, remind me thrice at least, right? Slack, about half of the Slack messages I look at. So the only way you can talk to me is, what's the only way to get hold of me?
In person.
Show up in person, right? And there's a lovely sitting space outside the office. If I'm not there, squat there. No, I'm kidding. So, but by the way, I apologize because I know that some of you have difficulty reaching me, but it's the nature of it, guys. I'm in the twilight zone. I get too much traffic on every possible channel. In WhatsApp, I receive close to 1,000 messages. On the cell phone, what is it called? iMessage. I get a flood of those. On my email systems, I literally receive 3,000 to 4,000 messages a day on all the different email systems that I'm supposed to maintain. And I don't even know what other social, LinkedIn. LinkedIn is flooded. Every guy and his brother says, Oh, I noticed that you are the CEO of this company. Did you know that we can increase your sales by 300%? Right? So LinkedIn is a disaster. Twitter, I dare not open. I don't know what will happen if I do open it. So Facebook, I've never touched in years. So remember that I'm not a social guy. Don't try to reach me there. But in any case, the reason I bring it is that there's a lot of people, I mean, sending you messages. They somehow, my phone number is public. You can't avoid it. I asked experts. They say you can't avoid it. The moment your phone number becomes public, people will impersonate you. Right? So I'm being impersonated. Don't buy it. Anyway, security is a huge concern. Now I'll ask you, what have you done about security in your application? Don't do anything yet. It will complicate your whole development process. But make sure that the last step in your journey, you must keep security in mind. Someday you'll have to put security. Okay. So let's think about it, guys. Well, what are some of the security measures you can put for your application? Think about it. Authentication. Authentication. What form of authentication? Does it?
What?
Yeah. So I learned it actually something from Mosme. It's amazing how much you learn from. I learned from people. I learned more from you guys than perhaps you learned from me. I learned from Mosme that username password doesn't help, even if you keep changing your password or keep it secure. You need to have multi-factor authentication and something called web authn. Yeah, is the gold standard, a biometric authentication. And also use TOTP, the one-time password token, passwords that go. And obviously the gold standard is how, I don't know, sometimes when I log into my bank, it feels like a 10-factor authentication, right? I just, every time I give some information, it asks for something else, right? Not to mention that I have a hardware token, like I have to look at the hardware device to see what number has popped up there and enter it. But apparently we live in very dangerous times.
So Asif, there's actually a number. Every time you add one more factor of auth,
Yeah.
you reduce the probability of hacking by 97%.
Really?
So it goes from if you could get hacked at every time or whatever, when you make it 2-factor, now you're at 3%. When you add a third factor, it is 97% of 3%. So you're down to like 0.03.
Wow.
Because the point is, it must be your username, password, and you must have the device, and you must have something. But even after all of that, some hackers will hack.
Wow. So I'll just repeat for those of you who are remote, what Satyam mentioned, something very interesting I learned. He's saying that for every factor of authentication that you add, you reduce the probability of being hacked by 97%. So let us say that originally you had a 3% chance of being hacked. You add 2-factor authentication, now it becomes 3% of 3%. That is less than 1%. Right? And then you hack, 0.1%, less than 0.1%. And then you add one more factor of authentication and it becomes small and small. And then that looked very optimistic and promising. And then Satyam deflated us by saying, and yet you will get hacked.
But the thing is, if there's 100 hackers in the world, there's only 1 or 2 who have that reached that level of sophistication
to hack.
By the way, the remaining 99 are using this to bump it up.
Using this what?
AI.
AI to bump it up.
They are now trying all sorts of models and things.
Yeah. Okay. So Satyam says that most hackers are now busy using AI for hacking you. And if there are 100 hackers, there'll be only one who has the resource to go about and hack you with your multi-factor authentication. So guys, do that. So multi-factor authentication is one thing. What else can you do?
Sensitive PII redaction while we have the data in our application.
Yeah, guys, here's the basic thing. Very good, very good. Who said that? Very good. So the basic idea is that, guys, don't store anything that you don't need, right? Nobody can steal what you don't have. Never store passwords, store some sort of a hash. Ideally, leave it to third-party organizations that are really good at managing that. Use an OpenLDAP, use Okta, use OAuth, whatever it is, at least that much you can do. Don't store passwords in your data, even the hashes in your database. They can be hash attacks. right? There's rainbow attack and many, many things we can do. Also, guys, if you're learning, how many of you are using Red Hat? I mean, Rocky Linux, we all are doing, right? Now, I'll give you a challenge. On all your Rocky Linux, you'll notice that there's something called SE Linux. Do we know what that is? Security Enhanced Linux. How many of you, as a basic practice, go disable it in your development?
In development.
In development, yeah. But in production, never disable it, guys. I learned it, by the way. This is something I myself am learning. So I'm a student in this as much as anyone else. I used to always disable it on my dev machine, right? In production, I used to wonder, is it really needed? Because it's a nuisance. SE Linux starts with the principle that by default, nothing is allowed to anyone. And one by one, you give permission for each action. But the tooling around SE Linux is not that hard, actually. I picked it up in a day. It produces very lovely audit messages, and you can set it in a permissive mode. So just to see that when you use your application in a sandbox where only legitimate requests are coming, exactly what warnings arise, and give permission one by one. And within a few minutes or half an hour, you can set only the limited number of permissions. So SE Linux is important. Encrypt your file system. Why should we encrypt your file system? Because if your hard disk goes walking away, data is not stolen. It's surprising how much data gets stolen from so-called discarded hard disks and physical hard disks. So guys, all of this, how many of you are approaching your web application over HTTP? Right? Don't do that. Use HTTPS, right? And like that, there are a lot of security measures you should do. The last thing is about ethics and interpretability. We'll come to when we do some more dangerous models in the course of this bootcamp. But in terms of search, guys, what could be an ethical responsibility? Age appropriate.
Yeah, I think, even OpenAI claims they now have AGI, and there have been several discussions about it. I think this idea of ethics is kind of like, I don't know how to say this nicely, but, it's kind of like, it's kind of how this country does politics. Most of the people who claim to be in AI ethics are the least ethical people. So I don't really know what the answer to that is.
Yeah, ethics is a matter of, obviously, ethics is a fuzzy topic. So let's take it offline, because it's a big and a really good point that you raised. What Shalini is mentioning, that ethics is subjective and differs from civilization to civilization. Right? For example, in the Western Hemisphere, eating beef is considered pretty healthy protein. In the Indian civilization, that would be sacrilegious. So what is ethics, right? And obviously now we're getting into jurisprudence and ethics and that self. And obviously to what extent we claim to be ethical, even by any set standard, but that's a separate topic. Yeah, let's take it differently, but a great point to raise. So the next thing I would like to say is, guys, I hope that this is what you learned in the last 1 month. This, by the way, there is an organization that I want you guys to become aware of. That organization is trying to set basic standards and policies of what we do, the whole AI infrastructure. What is it that we do so that every house doesn't have a completely different weird way of doing things? And there's a lot of history to it. It turns out that as they were doing all of this, many of you are familiar with CRISP DM standard of data mining, and now there's a CRISP ML standard. And Google was doing something, and different people, as they reach out to different organizations, even the big houses, and say, what is your blueprint for doing AI infrastructure? It turned out that when you put it all together, even the big houses had deficiencies, right? So there was a lot to learn by sharing, as always, coming together and sharing with each other what a good architecture should look like. And out of that sharing has come a set of general evolving idea of what an AI infrastructure looks like. So I'll start with this. So how it happens, the way it happens is you ideate, you have a use case for machine learning. From there, do you notice that there are 3 circles, the orange circle, the blue circle, and the green circle, right? If you think of the people who are data scientists, what are they busy doing? They are busy developing models, isn't it? All sorts of models and playing with it. Then there are data engineers who are busy creating data extraction, right? They spend their lifetime extracting more and more features based on requests and so forth. And data scientists are busy doing all sorts of data training, model building, remodel building, revalidation, and so on and so forth. So there are different tribes that are caught in different loops that they have to each be spinning both independently and in coordination, right? And then there is the ML ops guys, infrastructure guys. They will say, I don't know the math, but this is the way I know that model should go to production. Otherwise, it won't scale, right? And I don't want to know the internals of your model, but it better be along this line, right? So these are different tribal cultures, and they are all in their own loop. And the way I think of it is, if you ever open a mechanical clock, do you see their gears? Each gear is spinning in its own way, and yet each gear is interlocked with the other gears, isn't it? And the big flywheel through all of this is the fact that out of all of these independent spinnings, out of all this independent activity, has to come an enterprise class AI product, right? The big clock that has to come out of it. And so something to keep in mind. And so let us look at this. This again comes from the AI Infrastructure Alliance. Is the blueprint. This is the best of what we understand so far. Go ahead.
Just question. Are you going to share the slides after?
It is already shared with you. Look into Slack. So I apologize. I should have announced. I shared on Slack the link to it. Okay. So guys, let's look at this diagram a little more carefully. This is not a diagram that would have made sense to you a month ago, or you would have appreciated it. But in view of your projects, let's see how much of it have we done. Do we have a relational data store from which we are ingesting data? Or at this particular moment? Not really. We are reading in texts, right? Data lake object store that I trust in your project 2 you had. What was your object store made up of? Images, videos, audios, right? And even PDFs. I mean, all the documents probably were object stores. Were you using a network file system? I hope so, right? Were you generating synthetic data for your own problem? So far, I don't think you were, but if you were, it's very good. You were taking in all of this data, ingesting it. Were you going through the process of cleaning it? How many of you did any cleaning of the data in your project? Yes, you did. Because, for example, when you used Ticker, what did you realize to your unpleasant surprise when you looked at the PDF? It had a lot of empty spaces. The middle of the sentence would have gaps, right? Line breaks and things like that. So you had to clean up the data. Did you do any data validation? How many of you did data validation to make sure that what
Asif sir, can you tell us more about what data validation is? Because apparently this is a deep subject in the
Yes,
industry.
so I could do that actually. I would like to. Data validation actually takes many forms and is a big topic, but let me contextualize it with our project. See, does it make sense to index an empty or a file just made up of blank spaces? It doesn't. Does it make sense to index of data, a text that is just made up of symbols and strange characters, non-ASCII characters, and non-language characters? It wouldn't, right? Suppose you are using an encoder, a sentence encoder that is only English. Let us say, for the sake of argument, that you're using it. Did you validate that what you're feeding in is English, right? If you're feeding in multiple languages, did you make sure that you're only feeding in text for one of the supported languages? Isn't it? So all of that comes under data validation as far as this project is concerned. Now, when you have more tabular data, validation has many things. For example, how many missing values do you have? Are the data ranges completely out of bounds and it will screw you? For example, if you're doing linear regression, Outliers can have detrimental effect. You're trying to predict people's salaries. In the training data, there is a data point that says somebody is making $1 trillion a year. What that will do is it will hijack your linear model. So did you validate the data that it doesn't have things that simply don't make sense? Right? So all of that comes under data validations. Data transformations.
Yeah, I think even before we get into that, I think it's the subject material that we get it from. If your source is Breitbart News, or I'm just
Yes.
putting it out there. Maybe some people listen to Breitbart News, but there were people at work that were, losing their cool because some of the sources came from Breitbart that was being provided to consumers. So this is just a thought that I had. That's all I have.
No, thank you, Shali, for bringing that up. I'll just reiterate. Breitbart, for those of you who don't know, is considered by some to be a fringe right-wing media or media channel. And ultimately, if you scrape the web, you realize that you're picking up that material. And whenever you train models on all the material of the web, the one thing we have iterated is that, you're picking up the good and the bad and the toxic. Right? So based on which point of view or where you stand on the political spectrum, if you stand on the right, everything left-wing looks toxic. If you stand on the left, everything on the extreme right looks toxic. And if you, I don't know if you were a complete neutral rationalist, perhaps all sides look toxic. Right? So but certainly data validation, that is about data governance, and data provenance is part of, in some sense, data validation. Certainly true. Transformations. Did we do transformations, guys? What transformations did we do? Chunking and extraction. And image. Did we extract text from images, videos, audios? You did audio transformation. How many of you took the spectrogram approach? Created spectrograms out of your audio. Excellent. You did that. Chunking you did. How many of you have done spectrograms so far? None of you. Guys, you're still on project 1, it seems. Okay, so you'll find that you'll be doing that. That's transformation. Use case dependent, but are you going to attach specific labels, etc., etc.? So for example, is this root data, what is it? Is it text? Is it this, that? You're maintaining metadata. Then comes the training stage. So all of that are the data stage. Then you go to the training stage. Did you guys, at this moment, you didn't train the model. You didn't fine tune the model. You just use the model. You went straight to the train model, but sooner or later, you'll start training the model. Then we went to the train model, metadata stored, model repository. What was your model repository? Where did you store the model? At this moment, you just downloaded and used it because you have not done your own independent tuning, right? So you don't have a model repository. So today, let me introduce the concept of a model repository, guys. 2 concepts, feature store and model repository. See, it is very important for you to protect your models. Starting with open source, like Hugging Face, makes a pretty decent effort to make sure that the models there are not toxic. If you take models from reputable sources, they are quite safe. But at the end of it, you'll be fine-tuning it, or you'll be building models of your own. Have a model repository. Now, what are the advantages of having a model repository? Who would like to enlighten? Take a stab at it. Why do we need a model repository?
Fast switching.
Fast switching. If you have in-house on your network, you can not only that, if, like, for example, if the scientists come to the conclusion that in production, only this and this model should be used, and there is no other model, the people outside, the other teams, they have no choice to but use those sanctioned models, approved models, isn't it? Why is that important to limit usage or deployment to only approved models?
Compliance.
Compliance is one big thing. Excellent.
Reproducibility.
Reproducibility of the results, literally legal considerations, but above all, adversarial attacks. one of the things that happens, guys, is your models will go through adversarial attacks. You guarantee it. The neural networks are very prone to adversarial attacks. Adversarial attacks is a big topic. We are going to cover it in this bootcamp as one of the projects. I'll give you a model, and your task will be to attack and take it down. Right? So models must be preserved. People who can touch your model have extraordinary power, because with the right amount of data, you can teach the model to do pretty bad things. Very innocent models to produce pretty biased results. So the model's chain of custody and governance is important. How many hands has it gone through? Who has verified? Like after it has been verified for bias, in US, they are protected classes. If your model has bias coming from bias against gender, bias against age, bias against race, bias against disabled people, and there are such a protected classes, right? You cannot say, Your Honor, I didn't know that it had bias. It was your job to know that it had bias, right? Or you cannot say, I didn't deliberately inject bias into it. It was your job to make sure it didn't have bias. It did no harm.
Asif sir, this idea of bias is kind of, I guess, I wouldn't use the word subjective, but you know, it's that it has been inflamed by some individuals where that wasn't really the case. So there were data sets that had faces of people of color and people of various shades of color. But those individuals did not take that into consideration. So I would say that those data sets, I was one of the people who created those data sets, but I don't know whose hands it is in right now. But just asking you, this idea of bias, it just seems so political. It seems crazy.
It is. See, guys, all of these terms, so Shalini, well-made point. So I'll summarize it. See, guys, here's the thing. What is bias is a cultural construct, right? So Aristotle, the great Greek philosopher, was quite sure that men are smarter than women. Amongst his many evidences were the fact that men had more teeth than women. Obviously, he never opened Mrs. Aristotle's mouth and checked, right? So, and people have argued that men are.
He never met Indian women. That's what happened to him.
Yeah. So people often argue that men are smarter than women because we certainly seem to have, on average, bigger brains. Till someone points out that elephants have even bigger brains, but they're not willing to concede that elephants are smarter than us. I personally actually believe that elephants are smarter than us. Right? So, well, that is bias, right? So bias is a social construct, and we will discover as civilization moves forward what is and is not bias. But in legal terms, that is a social construct. But legally, there is a very clear definition of bias. Right? It comes under adverse impact. If you adversely impact one of the legally protected classes, you are in violation of the law. Legally protected classes are race, gender, age, and so forth. There are about 6 or 7 legally protected classes in the United States, and I believe that they're equivalent number in most civilizations. In the European continent, there is something like that. In China, there's something like that, and so on and so forth. There is something everywhere. So guys, importance of model repository. Can I request you that be more diligent now? Create a model repository in your project. Can I expect this from this week onwards, guys? That you will have a model. 2 things: have a feature store, have a model repository. Please take care of that. Did we deploy a model and have prediction inference engines on top of it? Yeah, right. We did all of that. So, guys, now, does this entire picture make sense to you? Do you see that we have done a little bit of almost everything here? Isn't it? And this is the infrastructure. One of my goals of the bootcamp was to make you learn this infrastructure. One thing that you have not done is monitoring.
Asif, can I ask you a quick question? This is Madhu.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah. So this picture is great. It's given all the building blocks in the complete ecosystem of an AI-centric enterprise. So
Yeah.
doesn't this picture basically painting a narrative that there's too many points of failure that typically enterprise tries to stay away from, right? Single point of failures, right? So if you normally look at, for example, ERP, there's not going to be too many points of failure. So, why would an enterprise kind of turn their ecosystem into an AI centric enterprise rather than bring in something that is doesn't have too many single point of failures, just from an understanding perspective.
No, Madhu, you asked an excellent question. The question, if I may rephrase, and please confirm if I got it right. AI brings inherently far more complexity and complexity and points of failure. And therefore, is an organization not better off just staying with traditional stuff and achieving it? And the answer to that is a little nuanced. First of all, here's a rule, guys. Don't use a new tool unless you absolutely have to. Right? It's the first rule of wisdom, minimalistic principle. If your work can be done without AI, bulletproof, that thing has evolved over 30, 40 years of software engineering. Do with that. Use AI because you have to, not because you want to, always. Having said that, see, it's a cost benefit thing. And the best way to illustrate the answer would be using an aeroplane. Do you absolutely have to use an aeroplane to go to India?
Yes.
Not really. Ships are pretty good. Or you can take a ship, and these container ships and these big cruise ships, they're pretty safe, much safer than you would think, much less complex than an airplane, because ships have literally 3,000-4,000 years of evolution. But why do you take an airplane? You take an airplane because of efficiency, because it brings some benefits. But look at an airplane. Airplane today has literally 1 million parts to keep it going, right? The engine, a ship, if an engine fails in a ship, if all the engines fail in a ship, the ship is still a floating raft, a giant floating raft, isn't it? You don't die. If all the engines fail in an airplane in the middle of a journey and you're mid-Pacific, you have about 2 hours to figure out what to do, because for 2 hours, the airplane can still glide and fly like a glider. 2-3 hours. By the way, I don't know if you guys know, all engines can fail and your plane is still a perfectly good glider. Right? But within 2-3 hours, it better find something to land on. You might not find something to land on in water. Right? So it's a dangerous thing, and yet we fly. The reason is you do reliability engineering, you improve that. The whole field of reliability engineering has only one mission: to make highly complex systems reliable. MIT offers this thinking called systems thinking. They say that, and one of my takeaways was that, I don't know if it was that first of all, you should always look at engineering from a systems approach, systems thinking, and think of systems. And systems is about reliability, amongst other things. You can make any system reliable. Aeroplanes don't fall off the sky. When you take a flight from here to India, your worst nightmare is the obnoxious guy who may sit next to you. What if that guy is as fat as Asif is and squeezes you into a corner in your seat, right? So you promptly bring your sidebar down, armrest down, to make sure that Asif doesn't encroach upon your seat, right? And those are your biggest worries. The last thing you worry about is engine failing, right? Or the airplane just going down. And yet, why is it? Because years of engineering has made it perfect, nearly perfect. Rarely do you have airplane in distress today. So that is reliability engineering. And Madhu, the point that you made is great. What you need to do is the same maturity of reliability engineering in the new pipelines that we are creating. And in a way, if you realize, my goal of this bootcamp was exactly that. People take immature AI models, put it on Flask or Fast API or something, and go to production. What are you learning in this bootcamp? I hope you're learning how to create how to think about it from a systems approach and create reliable, resilient systems. How many of you would agree with that?
I would, sorry, I 100% agree with that, because this is trouble we're having at work. And I think Madhu said something so eloquently and so calmly that, it's been questions that we're having at work, which is there's so many engineers with so many different skills. We need we need to do so much to
Yes.
go from point A to point B, that it's kind of like I don't know, it's kind of like, sorry, there's somebody yelling. Sorry, sir. Let me go back on mute when this is done.
Okay, guys. So yeah, Rishali, good points. Let's move forward, guys. Today, here's a plan. I would like to have the day structured slightly differently. We have started. I was going to do some administrative notes, which it turns out that I didn't quite do that. We went into the common pitfalls, but when I look at it, I should do that. So guys, room logistics. I'm finding too many cups and plates lying in your room, too many of you having food and, litter on the floor. Can I please request you that in the evening before you leave, please carry your dish. You don't have to wash your dishes. We have a dishwasher. We do it. Yours truly and my, this is a mom and pop shop. So just leave your dishes in the sink. Sumita and I, we do the dishwashing. Right? Just rinse and keep it there. Rinse it. Please don't just leave your cup with coffee and other stains there, because once the coffee dries, it takes us a little bit more effort to do it. Rinse your plates, then keep it in the bus tray. And in the evening, if you see litter on your floor, there are vacuum cleaners. Please just gently vacuum it, right? And do not leave plates, dirty plates, cups in your room. If you do that, I'll appreciate it, right? And it will help me, because at the end of the day, I get tired from the boot camp. And when you all are gone, that's what I am doing. Cleaning up the restroom, cleaning up the rooms, and so on and so forth. So help me out a little bit, guys. So room logistic or food. Some of you have, many of you actually have come up with food requests, and I have disappointing news I would like to entertain. So I tried to talk to the caterer to see if within the same price point, we could have a bit more variety. The caterer is not, because they have given us a fairly significant discount, but they are not quite flexible. So I can't vary that. And within the tuition that we have, I have two choices. Either we can increase the tuition, or we can, keep the food the same. And I know that some of you are totally bored of the Indian food and are asking for variety. I unfortunately am not able to do that. So I propose the following, guys. Food is a fringe benefit at the end of the day. I mean, it's to create a pleasant atmosphere, and I apologize for you. I'm not able to do that, and some of you have approached me. I could do this. If you guys volunteer, or pool up your money, like create a little fund pool collectively on Slack, and then let's have DoorDash, and we can order. We can, do some collective bargaining and order something alternative to what I order at Support Vectors. We can find some middle ground, right? And maybe if many of you are doing it and I have to order less food for support, the usual food, then whatever savings comes, I will put it in the pool of money that you guys are using to order from Garma. I'll be happy to contribute something from Support Vectors, whatever remains. So that is an interim, or that is a sort of a compromise that I can suggest. But within our budget, those are our limitations. The last point I want to make is teaching assistants are here for help. Many of you came late. Remember, we are the Sherpas taking you to Mount Everest, right? So if you want to be the brave Edmund Hillary, which I hope you are, we are your Tenzing Sherpa, right? Many of us are here. Please reach out, take our help. Now, we have talked about the common pitfalls, some of the things that you have been doing. Today, I would like to talk about three things, guys. We'll do three things. You have done RAG, isn't it? Now, one of the issues that happens with RAG is that ultimately you feed the result. How many of you did the RAG project yet? Zero? Okay. Let us say that in an alternate universe where all of you have done it and you are shaking your head and saying, yes, I'm talking to that audience. Theoretical physicists keep talking about parallel universes. So I'm in that universe for a moment, right? So when you do RAG and you use the LLM, you will experience that your LLM hallucinates, right? It makes things up. RAG is one of the best means to prevent hallucination. I said that, isn't it? That was the reason I started with search, because the biggest problem with the LLM is hallucination. I got you into search because you could use search and RAG to mitigate hallucination, but it doesn't completely eliminate it. So there is a new way of doing it. It's sort of active retrieval augmented generation. The algorithm is named as FLAIR, and I'll give you a one-line idea of it. Or maybe not, I won't give it to you. Your task now is, I will end the session right now. There are 3 papers. I want each team to do quiet reading. Please do that. Please don't just chit chat, talk about the weather, talk about how your project is going. Stop your project. Stop thinking about your code. Stop thinking about whatever it is that you have been doing. I want you to give from now till 1 a.m. or 1 p.m., 2 hours, right? 2 hours to reading these 3 research papers, or 2 of them Videolama, right? And the VST paper, both of them I've covered in the neural architectures course. 2 papers should be just a quick review, if you remember those papers that we covered in the neural architectures course. One of them is new, but it's a simple idea. It's an extension of RAG. It's active RAG. Right? Please study these papers line by line. I'm going to come to your room and check how you're making progress. If you're stuck in the paper, call me. I'll help you understand those papers. But please don't start coding. Don't do your projects. Please, however behind you're in the project, don't do your project. These 3 papers, do a team reading and discussion on these 3 papers. Are we together, guys? Please do that. Right? And at 1 p.m., we will meet again. We can even make it 1:30 p.m. because keep some time for lunch. But finish these 3 papers and then have lunch. Are we together? Don't have lunch without it. Right? Otherwise, you'll be sleepy and you won't read the paper. Biryani does wonders on the mind. Right? Please do that. And our agenda for the day is 1 p.m. I will do a guided reading. If it is needed, but if you all feel no, we don't need it, we'll move forward. At 3 p.m., we'll do the team presentations. We'll invite a couple of teams to present their work, but presentations will be optional. Are we together, guys? We'll have presentations today in this room. You can choose to attend it, you can choose to ignore it. I would invite you to attend if you feel value in it. You don't have to, you can continue doing your work, right? But the purpose of that is, see, it depends upon to what extent you feel that the cohort itself, their feedback brings value to you. Right? If you have done a pretty good job, then move on. And maybe you have heard enough feedback, the point of diminishing returns comes in. Ultimately, the next team that presents often gets pretty much the same feedback. So if you feel that the point of diminishing returns has kicked in, then continue doing your project. Right? That is it. At 5:30, I'm starting a new, Albert, I'll come to you in a moment. At 5:30, I'm starting a new tradition, guys. And that is again optional, but I hope that you will attend that, whether you attend the presentations. It is that we all are seeing a generative AI Cambrian explosion. Algorithms, new discoveries are happening at a breathtaking pace. Just like in the history of the earth, there was the Cambrian period when all of a sudden there were millions of new species of animals that showed up. It was the Cambrian age or the Cambrian explosion on Earth eons ago. In the same way, in machine learning, in AI, we seem to be having something very marvelous. And the closest equivalent that I think of it is the Cambrian explosion in biology. It is almost like new large language models, new algorithms, new things are popping up, each amazing. And I can't keep up. And I try very hard to keep up, right? So one way that one very successful way to keep up is, which we have been doing in our support vectors learning community, is that we have been sharing it on Slack. But I would like to keep 5:30 as a session in which whatever we discovered, whatever we learned about, we just collectively share and tell each other. We do short show and tells, verbal. It doesn't have to be presentations, verbals. We'll do a 5:30 discussion. Once again, optional. If you want to attend, attend. If you want to.
What is the show and tell?
Just talk about what you found. So this is a gossip time, right? Happy hour.
Like learnings.
Learnings, yes, learnings.
Not about the papers.
Come on, just in general, what have we discovered? Albert.
So you said you have to vote on each other's project, right? So I think everybody has to attend.
Yes,
It makes
we'll
sense.
take the vote from the people who did attend or know or took interest in each other's projects. And by the way, I've been rather behind in putting those polls up. I should be putting those polls up because, guys, it helps to appreciate each other's work. Even if you don't attend the demos, walk into each other's room, see what others have done, have an opinion, give them some good feedback. Right? It helps. So, guys, that's the plan. And so I would like to end today's session. Any questions before I end? And now is the time, as you see from this, it is the time for readings. Go read the 3 papers.
Are these papers should we download from archive?
Yeah, it's here. It's mentioned in the presentation. Download from archive, read it. So, well, AI has deep roots. It's a fun fact. So first it was used to play games and solve math problems. By the way, AI algorithms have been used for the longest time for weather predictions and ocean current predictions. Right? So, and some of these algorithms date back to the Manhattan Project. Some of you who saw the Oppenheimer movie was all about Oppenheimer. So you don't get the whole sort of a 360-degree view of the amount of scientific breakthroughs that came out of that project. But there were a lot of scientific breakthroughs that came out. Amongst them were some algorithms here. The Metropolis algorithms, Monte Carlo, Markov, Monte Carlo, and so forth have their roots there. So guys, this is silent readings and later discussion, 3 papers. All of you have this presentation on Slack. Please go pay attention to it. I'll end with another fun fact. AI market is booming, guys. Take your projects seriously. Opportunity is at hand. Really, opportunity is at hand. Okay? And this is it. Huge impact on jobs. AI is going to wipe out. AI is now able to do startups. So maybe the next outfit that makes presentation to VCs will not be made up of biological beings, but will be a bunch of AI agents presenting and asking for funding. Thank you, guys. So please do paper readings. I'll be in the room. Thank you. Yes.
Asif sir, what do you think about the hallucinations that a lot of the LLMs are doing? Because we're seeing this more and more. It's just making up stories.
Shani, I'll ask you a question. One moment. I have a question from the room, so I'll park you for a moment. Please go ahead, Albert. What do I think of that?
So the model repository, we put a model in Hugging Face. Is that the plan?
See, Hugging Face is a public model repository. But in your company, you need to have your own model repository of only those models that you want people to use in production.
And what's the right way to do that? How do you
Model repositories are usually object stores with well-defined access. Now, to Shalini's question, what do I think about hallucination? See, hallucination is the central core problem. LLMs hallucinate. And it has a lot to do with the fact that LLMs are using the next word prediction technique, which I think is the key weakness that we have. Mathematically, we need to find an alternative to the next word prediction. You know, doing a sampling of the softmax and doing a next word prediction. Unless a better alternative comes up, I don't think the hallucination problem will be solved theoretically, but I think it is significantly mitigated with RAG and with this active RAG that we are talking about.
Yeah, I think even with active RAG, that's something that I'm discussing with my team and the team here at, the boot camp, but also at work. The thing is, we cannot mitigate some of these hallucinations. Like even if we ask something like, who is Joe Biden's wife? Sometimes it gives us, I mean, it's pretty clear who he's married to because there are legal documents based on it, but it gives us some weird answers. And so we have to go back and look at why we're getting that. That's because there's so much information that, well, I don't want to say it, but there's so much information regarding some of his, let's just say, inconsistencies. So I think this is the thing about hallucinations. It will statistically we can bang our head against the wall, but it's also it's just kind of the thing, there's so much gossip, there's so much online information, like this whole Breitbart thing that drove basically somebody so crazy they needed to take 2 days off of work. It was so deeply upsetting to them. So the point being is that there is going to be hallucinations, and there's so many of these models. Where do we stand? What is the best one? How do we move forward? So these are like deep questions, like we're asking. Yes, we can get paid. Yes, we can become a company, but how do we stand out? How do we stand up, and how do we stand out?
Yeah, that's a good question, Shalini. I wish I knew the answer. I don't. In fact, I'm myself probing and hoping for a discussion. So simply, I would say that it's a real concern, and I don't know the answer.
No,
But
thank you,
for
Asif,
bringing-
sir. We don't know the answer either. It's just so much garbage out there. we just don't know the answer either. Yeah, it's very frustrating. Yeah.
Nice, Shani. Thank you for bringing up those interesting points. It's a reality. I guess we'll learn as we move